Okay. You ready to do this? You ready to get back to podcasting? Because I miss it.
Yeah.
All right. Hello and welcome to Learning the Law, a podcast about all things legal with a focus on current events where we try to teach you things in an hour. My name is Ashley, aka Phoenix Nymphy, and my co-host, who is the man of the hour and the one really here to teach you and me, is my husband, Ron. This podcast is purely educational and should not be taken as legal advice. This podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship. This podcast is based on his interpretation of relevant law. Any opinions expressed are the opinions of the individuals making them and do not reflect the opinions of any firm, company, or other individuals. Ron is a licensed practicing attorney in the state of California.
Yes, I am. And have been for a while. September 15th, 1999.
Oh my God. Why did you take so long to say it?
It's the anticipation.
Oh, you know what? I would love to see if there is a midnight showing of Rocky Horror around here, because that would be really fun to go watch. I've never been to a midnight showing and I would love to. So it's been a couple of weeks again. I know y'all. Thank you so much for everybody who's still listening to the podcast. Everybody who gives us love. Y'all are amazing. If you're here live in the podcast, remember we do take questions live. But you can also email us at twolazydogsmedia@gmail.com if you have any questions. I do check that regularly. That is my work email. I should probably just make up an email for the podcast. But right now, this is how we're gonna do it. But yeah. Oh my God. We've had an insane month, really. Like we did a podcast a couple weeks ago, and then we had to take another hiatus because life just kind of went crazy. So good news, everybody. The last time we did the podcast, Ron had the first interview of 3 interviews.
3, yes.
The first interview of 3 interviews for the new job, and he got the job.
Yes, I did. I'm so happy.
Oh, God.
I can't express how happy I am.
I am so proud of you, babe. And this is he starts on June 15th, and can we talk a little bit about what you're going to do? Because you're actually really proud of this. This is actually really...
Yeah, we won't name the firm.
Okay, yeah, we'll keep the firm anonymous. But tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing now.
I am going to be helping low-income individuals have access to legal assistance in whatever area they would need. I'll be doing primarily bankruptcies and some consumer protection. But the firm also helps low-income people with disability law, social security law, family law, minor criminal, because, if you can't afford a criminal attorney, you can usually get a public defender.
Yeah, this is not public defender legal aid work. This is where you actively go seek out an attorney. This is not an attorney being assigned to you, but you do get
landlord tenant law.
Yeah. So this is and this is something that you've always wanted to do. You've always wanted to get with a firm that actually helps people.
Right. Which is not the firm I'm at currently.
No.
That helps an insurance company.
Yeah. And they do a little bit of advocacy work and didn't they say they wanted to get more into it?
Yeah, they go out into the community and do legal seminars for people if they have questions about anything. So I'll be going out into the 2 counties that we serve, doing some bankruptcy seminars at some point.
So yeah, thank you so much to everyone who's been sending us all the love and prayers and all the good juju and the good vibes. It definitely paid off.
Yeah. Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Super excited. He basically gets to do this and get paid for it, which is really awesome. And we're going to continue doing this as well. And growing the podcast. And as far as the car goes, I know a lot of people are really concerned about the car. For those of you who have never listened, our car went out. We're a one car family. We've had our car for a decade now. She's been a great car. It's an Equinox. Highly recommend Chevy Equinox. I'm a Chevy girl anyway. But it did blow a head gasket and we had to go get a new car. And we ended up getting a car before we got the okay on the job. Like it was definitely a risk that we ran, but we didn't have a choice. And we almost thought we weren't going to get to keep the car, but suffice it to say, things worked out. God came through and was like, no, this is your car. So we have a new car. Well, new to us. It's a used car, but it had 40. I mean, I can't get over the fact this car had 44,000 miles on it when we bought it.
Yeah.
It's a 2017 and it had 44,000 miles on it. I'm just like, what? What? So, we've been stressed to the max. We've been very, the depression has been very real this month. So, it's been really tough to focus our mind to do a podcast. So, thank you so much for everyone who does listen to the podcast. And thank you for understanding us needing to take another hiatus. But we're hoping now that things have the turmoil and everything, it's not so crazy. And we're not trying to get rides to everywhere and, deal with craziness at work and stuff. We can now get back to doing the podcast regularly.
Yep.
So today,
looking forward to it.
we're starting a series. We called this series an introduction. We called this episode an introduction to manipulating elections. So this is a series. We're not necessarily going to do it in a chronological order or anything. But we wanted to talk about gerrymandering because the census has come up. We had the census last year. And there was a lot of craziness going on surrounding that, along with COVID. And there's a lot of issues with the census and like what the census is, why it's important. Like it's very important to the census, but how it's used for us and how it's used against us. And gerrymandering is one of the big things, how it's used when it comes to political gain and stuff like that. There's just a lot of legal things that goes into the census, but I know that one of the biggest things about the census is that people don't want to fill it out because they don't want to be turned into ICE and they don't want to be deported, and that is a very legitimate scare, a very legitimate reason not. I understand why you don't want to fill it out, but the main reason why you fill out the census is because of the infrastructure. If you don't fill it out, they won't know how many people are actually in that area, regardless of whether or not you are legal, illegal, whatever. If you
a lot of federal funding is based on that data.
Yes.
So if you don't fill it out, your school is not getting the federal funds for your children. Yeah. Basically.
So Ron wanted to kind of start talking a little bit about how voting works, especially with not this year, but next year is going to be another election because every 2 years there's always an election. I mean, I think every year there's an election somewhere locally. So we want to kind of keep that in the back of your minds. It's very important to know this stuff, especially with the stuff that has come out recently with the abortion bills and all of that stuff that's, very political, the anti-voting stuff, which we've touched on. So today we're going to talk about gerrymandering, and we're going to focus on what that is and how that is wrapped up into the census, how that can, be used positively, how it can be used negatively. And we'll let Ron take it over from here.
So the basics is what is gerrymandering? And in essence, it's manipulating the boundaries of an election district so your party has an advantage. And so what happens is, say, we'll just call it the right-wing party is in power, and they get to draw the election districts. What they can do is they can take the data from the census and see who typically, they have their own data of who typically votes for them. They can then compare that with the census data, and they can draw districts. So there are majorities in each district of the type of person, according to their data, that lives there. Okay, and that's why, yeah.
So it's whatever party is in charge that year?
Every 10 years, there's the census. And every 10 years, based on that census, the districts are redrawn.
But, okay, and so it's whatever party is in charge of, is in whatever party is in power.
Historically, yeah. Right now, there's, I believe, 38 states whose state legislature redraws the districts. So whoever has the majority in the state houses get to redraw. In other states, there's a bipartisan commission or an independent commission to redraw.
But that's not that many. So my question is, what's the point of why do we do that? Like, what's the point of even having district lines?
Back in the day when the Constitution was first formed, you had election districts because they wanted an everyday kind of person to be representative of the people in the local district.
That doesn't work now, though, because
back in the day, you would have a congressman represent about 30,000 people.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, nowadays it doesn't. It's not easy to do it that way anymore. Like, it doesn't really work that way anymore when it comes to that. Your everyday person representing your people, because
essentially because
they don't have the money. Yeah,
there's too much money in getting elected. Your average person cannot run for anything besides, really local elections, school board or.
Wouldn't it be more efficient to actually remove the district lines anyway? Because then you would have a more realistic idea of what the states look like if you're basing it off of, like, you've mentioned this before, like the top, however, say we'll go with a small state. Say Rhode Island gets 10 representatives that goes to the House of Representatives. I'm pulling a number out of my butt. Say they have 10 representatives that go to the House. Wouldn't it actually make sense to have the top 10 representatives that are voted instead of doing it by district and just splitting it up into districts?
See, that to me would be more fair to the electorate and the people voting.
Because you'd have a better idea of what the people actually want, wouldn't you? Because, when you are doing, the way it looks, the way you're explaining it, the way I'm understanding it and the way I understand it now is that whoever's in charge, whether it's Democrat or Republican, depending on how they draw those lines, like, say you have we'll go with the shape of Georgia because I understand the shape of Georgia better, right?
Okay.
Because it is, no, we'll go with what? Wyoming or Colorado. Colorado is a square state. Okay. We'll go with a square state. All right. So you split it, say you split it up evenly and you have like 8 districts, right? And they're even. You have Democrat, you have 4 Democrat, 4 Republican. Okay. All right, cool. That's fair. Right. But then say you have a census 10 years later and that census has Democrats who take over it. They just go in and they just change, like, say they change this little Republican section to be a little bit smaller and this Democrat section to be a little bit bigger, or even make more districts so that you have, because there's like say your Republican section's kind of purple and you're like, no, we want these little Democrats.
Okay, I'll stop you right there for one thing. You can't just make more districts.
Okay, so you can't make more districts.
However many congressmen you're allotted is the number of districts you get. And the state legislature does not get to change that.
Okay.
So,
if your population grows, though, do you get more districts?
If you get enough population, so you get another electoral vote in comparison to other states, then yes, you get more districts. For example, coming up, I believe Texas is gaining 1 or 2 districts. California is losing a district.
Because a lot of people have left California.
A lot of people have left California, and a lot of people didn't fill out the census form.
Because California has a large abundance of illegal immigrants.
Yes, we do.
So, yeah, I can see why a lot of them did not. Okay.
Okay, so for example, then, you have Colorado. For example, they have more than 8 districts, but we'll just call it Square State. Square State has 8 districts. New party comes into power. They get to redraw the district. Now, each district has to have an approximate same number of people in it.
So instead of, say, squares, you can do circles instead. You can just change the way the district. See, and I don't...
That's why there's more districts in an urban center than there is in a rural center.
Okay, I can understand that because you have more people in certain, like, you're going to have more people in the city of LA versus, I don't know, what's the armpit? Fresno. You're going to have more people in LA versus Fresno, right?
Right.
That's, okay, I get that.
Okay, so now, depending on your identity, politically, you get to redraw the district. Say more wealthy people vote for you, and typically low-income people do not vote for you. So as you're redrawing the district in, say, LA, you really want the Beverly Hills vote.
Okay.
Generally speaking, for your party. You really don't want the South Central LA vote.
Right. Because that's going to be your lower income, marginalized community vote.
What gerrymandering does is it takes a large majority of, say, the Beverly Hills population and runs a little section of the district down to South Central. And this is an example. Runs it down to South Central where you have a majority low-income people. And they put enough low-income people into that district that essentially their vote is diluted. No matter how much they vote, they're not going to overcome that wealthy majority.
And that's how apathy comes into play, and how people are like, my vote doesn't count.
Right. Because
That is such a way to discourage people from voting.
yeah, that's one of the effects of gerrymandering is voter apathy.
Wow.
And the side effect is to suppress votes of people
And the
that you don't
money,
want voting. And it's not one party or the other. Historically, each party has done this.
absolutely. Yeah. This is not a we hate the GOP. This is this is all across the board. Cuz that also, well, then that would, big brain moment right here. Then that would also mean that is what helps and allows us to keep a two-party system.
Right.
That just helps perpetuate and emphasize the two-party system, because you just have those two parties doing these lines. And instead, where if you just get rid of districts, then you might have more, Green Party or individual parties actually coming and making it into Congress.
Right. For example, and I'll give the hypothetical way of voting that you said earlier. Everybody just runs for at-large congressional seats.
Yeah.
You can be assigned a district later. Okay. But say 30 people run, you get 10 congressmen. Well, the top 10 vote getters get those votes. Get those positions. Now, if everybody in the Green Party wants to vote for one candidate, that's pretty good. They may get a congressman that way. Now, the two major parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, are going to have to decide which of their party members they want to vote for.
Hold up. So you would. So are you suggesting that we would need to limit how many, like, Republicans or Democrats kind of deal? Okay.
Nope.
What are you saying?
What I'm saying is, if out of those 30 people that are running, there's 14 Republicans, 14 Democrats, 1 independent, and 1 Green Party.
Okay.
The Democrat voters in the state are going to have to decide which Democrat,
which are the better candidates,
they want to vote for. If every Democrat in the state votes for one Democrat and leaves the others without votes, then they're at risk of losing a ton of congressmen.
So you got to figure out like party. So then okay, so that's kind of the benefit of having a district, because then you're able to. But the problem is it's never evenly split.
Right.
Interesting. That's wow. Okay.
And likewise, then
you're able to play devil's advocate.
The money that goes into campaign financing would have to finance all the candidates pretty much equally.
Right.
Because right now, donations don't go towards safe districts.
Right.
Because it's not needed. So we'll just say Bank Corporation can donate $50 million to one person's campaign. You can't really beat that person.
Right.
Unless the other side gets 50.
Well, we addressed that a little bit in the last episode.
Right, but that's an effect of gerrymandering.
Oh, because of the way the RNC and the DNC works, it all goes.
Right. If you had to take all that money and distribute it more evenly against all candidates, it'd be a little bit more fair process.
Again, that requires regulation, though, that used to exist, but now no longer exist.
It didn't really exist in that format.
Well, okay.
There was
historically. Was there a limit to how much you could spend, or was it Is it
Yes.
always? So there was a limit to how much you could spend on campaign.
There still is for people.
No. I mean, like the candidate themselves.
A candidate can spend as much money as they want.
Okay. So, but historically, there's always been a limit to what you can give to a candidate as an individual and as a corporation.
Yeah, now I believe the corporations are unlimited, but you as an individual are still limited.
Right. And I think that says a lot that we allow the corporations to give more, which is weird. And I mean, in and of it, I mean, I think it's obvious that anyway, we won't go on that tangent. We're focus.
There'll be another episode of how to manipulate an election.
One of my favorite TikTokers. Focus. That's not why we're here. I love her so much. I can't think of her name right now. Queen Pinky Sauce, something like that. Pinky, she's fantastic. Anyway, focus.
Yeah.
I hate myself right now.
Here's a real life example of what's happened in New York, 2012. The lawmakers and the governor signed off on district maps that the New York Times showed were carefully designed to keep those legislatures safely in their jobs. In Florida, a judge ruled the Republicans had illegally drawn the state congressional districts in such a way that made a mockery of fairness and ordered 2 districts to be withdrawn or redrawn.
Wait, what? Hold
Yeah.
up. Can you explain that again?
Yeah. In New York, which it's a Democratic state.
Yeah.
The New York Times took a look at the way the districts were drawn after the 2010 census and showed that they were designed to keep all of the legislatures, or practically all the legislatures, safely in their jobs. They drew the districts such that each had a Democrat majority.
Oh, okay. And they were like, that's not cool. This isn't cool. You gotta have a more fair districting.
Right. In Florida, after the 2010 census, were ordered, because they got sued, to redraw 2 of their districts.
Okay.
Because the court said the way you drew the district is making a mockery of fairness.
So,
and in North Carolina, after the 2010 census, if you go by the popular vote of the people, Democrats won 50% of all the votes that were cast for House candidates.
Yeah.
They only got 4 of the 13 representatives because of the way the districts are drawn.
That doesn't seem fair. If you've got 50% of the votes, democratically speaking, you should have 50% of the representatives that are that same. Wow.
But that's why there's districts.
Okay, but if the districts are not fair and they're not fairly drawn, so this is okay. So that's a problem. So gerrymandering, the way it works now, is very easily abused. But the point of it is to try to keep things fair. And if we are to go away from gerrymandering, there's another way that you could easily abuse the system, if not more. So my question is, like, in a parliamentary system or is it parliamentary or parliamentary? Does it matter?
Depends if you're English or American.
Okay, well, I'm American,
pronouncing it.
And I'm going to say parliamentary system. So as far as the parliamentary system, how do they have districting? Because they do have a lot more representatives representing their people, and they have less people in their country. At least England, they have less people in their country, than we do here, but they have a heck of a lot more people representing their people. So in their house, basically, how do they? Do you have any idea? This is a question I just thought of, and it's probably something you'd have to research to answer that question.
Well, there's approximately 50 to 60 million people in the UK.
Yeah.
They have approximately, from what I see here, 364 members of parliament.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a lower total number than we have, but they have a better representative to population ratio.
Okay, how did they do that then? Like, why is that? Is there something that? And I'm not saying England does it right. I'm not saying the UK does it right. Nobody's perfect, especially after all of the crap that we just learned over the weekend. If you are not aware, I highly recommend going and learning about Canada's native indigenous problem. It's not what we learned over the weekend is something that's not new. It's not surprising. It's devastating and needs to change. America's not the only one who is genocidal to Native Americans. But that's a tangent. Nobody's perfect, and we need to hold these people accountable.
I'm going to change what I just said.
Okay.
There are approximately 364 conservative members of parliament.
So that's not even the whole...
No, the total number is 650.
Yeah, we don't have that many people.
No, we have, I believe, 435.
So they have a little over 200, about 300 more representatives. And that's not even including the House of Lords and Senate.
Right. The House of Lords really doesn't do anything in the
Senate,
in the UK anymore.
Yeah. So they have about 300 more people representing. How many people do we have? I think we're in the billion.
No.
Are we not? We're not that much.
2010 census, we had, I believe, like 340 million. So I would expect the end result of the 2020 census maybe 380 to 400. So we have approximately 7 to 8
according
times.
to the U.S. population in 2020, a little over 331 million people in the U.S.
Oh, didn't have as many babies as I thought. Okay.
Oh yeah, like there's a decline when it comes to children across the board in a lot of nations. Africa's is going up. A lot of nations that within Africa, the population, like the birth ratio is going up because things are actually improving in Africa. But a lot of countries like China, America, Japan, the UK, a lot of European nations, it's going down. The United Kingdom has 66.65 million. So yeah, we have, what's that, triple the amount of people?
5 times.
5 times the amount of people and way less representation. So if we were to just based off of how the parliamentary system works in the UK, and I'm only saying UK because in England, because that's the most closely related to the US for obvious reasons. Based off of that, if we were to compare ourselves to that, how many more representatives would we need to even be remotely close to how many representatives actually represent their people?
Quick math in my head, about 2,700.
Yeah. And that's just House of Representatives. That's not even dealing with Senate stuff. So gerrymandering kind of really keeps us from being able to expand as well.
I would like everybody who's listening to this podcast to look up their own district and see if there's any logical sense to the way it's drawn.
I actually
And
want to
you're
look at, I don't even know. I don't remember what I always have to look every time we go to vote. I always have to look what our district is because it's not something that rests in my head at the
right.
drop of
And
a
most of the time you're going to say WTF. What's going on?
I know that our district in Georgia, when I looked at it in Georgia, the way it was drawn, I was like, how does this make sense? Because we were like this little penis of this big, like, weird circle. Like, it was a weird circle, but it kind of dipped down, just kind of like Florida. It kind of dipped down a little bit and then went back up, and like a thought bubble almost, the way it looked. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why is this drawn? This is such a weird drawing because we lived in a sort of affluent area. So they wanted
There's probably some data that said, and historically, Georgia's been the Republicans. The Republicans said, if we just draw this little bloop here, we'll get this many more votes.
Yeah. Which kind of is funny because that area turned blue while we were there.
Yeah.
While we were there, it became blue. Like it's very purple in that area. So I'm just like, so there's good and there are bad things about districting, about gerrymandering, but why do we need to redistrict every single time? Like, I guess my question is, why can't we create the districts, leave them as is, and like create them evenly, regardless of, like create, like say you have a square. I know it's not easy when you don't have a square state, but like you have a square state, it's easy to divide it up evenly. So like, I mean, there are mathematicians out there whose sole job is to do crap like that. So why can't you do that?
You can divide the square mileage up, of each district evenly. Right. That's not going to put the same amount of population in each district.
Well, okay. It's the population thing that gets you because the cities are going to have more people than... What? Okay. So the effect of gerrymandering, essentially, what is the effect of gerrymandering ultimately?
The effect is to dilute the votes of those that the party in power do not want to see voting.
So we talk
and that leads to people believing that their vote doesn't count.
Okay.
And that in turn leads to low voter turnout. And when the turnout is low, you get these motivated voter groups that get to push their agenda in government because they will all go out and vote.
Right.
A lot of times people are elected to office that get 10 to 15% of the eligible voters.
I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the perfect example of that. She had literally nobody running against her.
Right.
Because there was no viable, like there was just, it's a more conservative district. The district that it was a district that's because the marginalized communities that do live there are definitely lower income. So they historically have they are less likely to vote. The particular area, because I believe she's Douglasville is where she came from.
I believe so.
Which is a very poor. It's one of those districts in Georgia. It's one of those areas in Georgia that have extremely racist people, extremely racist conservative people, and then the liberals that are there are broke and poor Like it shows that system. It shows that system a lot. It's very evident in that particular area.
I'm looking up right now to see if that is actually where she's from.
I want to say Milledgeville. Oh. Wait, no, that's where she's from.
That's where she was born.
That's not where her district is the 14th district. Yeah. With Rome, Calhoun, Dalton. Yeah. So just past Douglasville.
Right.
Yeah.
Going all the way to the Tennessee border.
Yeah. So yeah, that is Pickens County, Polk. A lot of you hear, some of those are, I believe is it Pickens or Polk? Where there was the story about the black kid who was rolled up into the.
No, that was in South Georgia.
Oh, South Georgia. Okay.
Kendrick Johnson rolled up into the
wrestling mat. Yeah.
Bruises all over his body, according to the second autopsy.
And they just ignored it. Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah. That was okay. So, it's the area that is very much. It's not necessarily. It has its affluence areas, but it's very racist. Like all of those. I'm looking at all of these counties and I'm like, yeah. Anyway, I digress.
I'm just looking at the way her district is drawn.
Yeah, it's weird. It's so weird.
Yeah, there's a big bite taken out of the lower right quadrant.
It just like, it's weird the way it's drawn. And so, So, do you think there is a point to having districts?
There's a point to having districts in that you need to be able to see the local electorate and meet with them.
Okay.
Even though most people don't anymore.
So, do you God, this is so depressing. I feel like a lot of our podcasts are so depressing sometimes.
Honestly, I don't see a reason for districts. Generally, what you could do, if we did that top 10 or top 5 or however many congressmen you get, if we did that way of voting, you could have your state divided up into the same square miles. And just assign a person to a district once they're voted in,
regardless of whether or not they live there. I can see where that would be.
I would give priority to somebody who lived in the district.
Yeah, because I can see, like, say you live in LA and you're assigned a district up in Northern California. You know what I mean? Like that's what you're. So I understand why you want to have that's another reason why you want districts, because you kind of want people who have lived there and understand like that particular area and the issues within that area.
Yeah, that is true.
So what are like, man, I have so many questions and I can't focus enough to,
in order to get around gerrymandering.
Wait. I just remembered a question that I wanted to ask you earlier. When you have those, we'll go back to the question of the Beverly Hills down into like Inglewood or whatever in the South Central. Does South Central get any of that money? Because remember when North Fulton was talking about how they wanted to split off because the way the money because they were like, we don't like that our money is going to the schools in South Fulton, right? Because North Fulton County is extremely affluent and South Fulton County is not. I mean, they're complete opposites when it comes to when it comes to wage discrimination, just everything. How does the districting, when you do that, how does that affect education and the way money is spent within that district? How does that affect that?
It doesn't have a direct effect.
Okay.
Most funding is done on the county, city, or state level from the federal government.
Okay, so if
the district doesn't really matter. However, I'm sorry, I have a dog barking at me. What it does indirectly is the person that is voting for the funding in Congress and wants to pass a budget knows who is electing them to that seat and will keep their voters happy, basically.
Gotcha.
If it doesn't interfere with the people that are actually funding their campaign.
So, I mean, and one of the biggest things, and this is the reality, this is the reality in me, the realistic person in me, you're never going to get away from corruption. You're never going to get away from it.
Right.
But what we can do is to help eliminate the ease in which you can do the corruption and actually hold people accountable who do it, and do it faster and do it more thoroughly and do it more fairly. It's kind of like keeping the honest man out. Like, when you are tempted to do something, no matter how honest you are, depending on what's going on in your life, you might do that thing that you shouldn't do just because it's easier. And so if we can kind of help alleviate that in whatever we do, it'll be a lot easier to find the bad seeds, the actual bad seeds too. Because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does stupid stuff. Nobody's perfect. But if we continue to allow corruption to be as easy as it is right now, we're never going to be able to fix it. And that's why we kind of have to talk about it. That's why we do this kind of stuff. That's why we put it in your face. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. It sucks. But that's how change happens, is when you're uncomfortable. Nobody wants to sit in their own piss, right? They're uncomfortable.
True.
Nobody wants to sit in their own pee and poop. So what do? You get up, you go wash yourself off, and then you don't do it again.
Hopefully.
So, and right now, America is sitting in their own stool, and we really need to clean ourselves big time. So what would be your suggestions when it comes to the whole districting thing? Like, my theory, you've already poked holes in my theory, which is based off of something you've said before. So, I mean, I can't completely say it's my full theory, but it's sort
right.
of...
And I would investigate that way of voting. I don't know that it would be a solution or not. And the other problem would be you would need all the states to go to that kind of voting. So it's not a realistic solution in the short term.
No, I mean, these are things that it's going to take time. I mean, you're looking at hundreds of years of, doing something the same way. It takes a long time to get people to make that kind of a change.
Right. You would need a federal law.
Hush.
That would set down rules and principles for the drawing of district borders. What those rules and principles would be, it would be up to Congress but then every state would have to follow them.
Yeah. So
Also, each state needs a nonpartisan commission to draw their district borders. The people in power should not be allowed to draw district borders that keep them in power.
I think short term, that's probably the best thing that we could do right now to kind of help make it a little bit more fair. And I will say, I think a lot of us are looking for that instant gratification. And you're not going to get that. Not when it comes to changing the systems like this, changing systemic everything.
Right.
It took us, 200 and something years to get here. It's going to take a little time to get away from it. But we have to try. We have to keep pushing because we can make it better. It is a legitimate thing we can do. It's happened throughout history.
It took 40 some years to get Brown versus the Board of Education ruled on.
Yeah.
At the Supreme Court level. They had to start, I believe, in the 1910s or early 1920s with little local cases. And it was like eating the elephant. They had to eat it, one bite at a time. Until it got to the point where in 1954, the Supreme Court really had no choice.
The problem with that, though, is how easy it can be to overturn that.
Right. And as you're going to see,
because that's going to be a big fight. And we can address that in another podcast, because we are getting towards the end, and abortion in its own right and the abortion bill that just happened is actually something we could discuss.
I would like to discuss abortion law before they make their decision on that case that they're hearing.
Because I think even if the Supreme Court does make the decision and overturn Roe v. Wade, I think a lot of people are still going to fight against that.
I know we're going off on a tangent. A lot of people don't understand why Roe v. Wade was ruled the way it did.
Yeah.
It wasn't just purely, is abortion legal or not? It's based on an implied right of privacy in the Constitution. And if you're going to overrule Roe v. Wade, you're going to have to do it in a way that either doesn't change that there's an implied rule of privacy.
It doesn't affect just abortion, is Roe v. Wade.
Or you're going to have to say there is no implied right of privacy in the Constitution, and that is its own Pandora's box. Because if you have no implied right of privacy, you're not going to need a whole lot of warrants for anything.
Yeah. And that's a whole other thing that we can,
Yep.
if y'all want that to be our next topic, let us know. I'm kind of feeling that. If not, let us know what you would prefer. Do you want us to kind of continue on the manipulating the vote conversation, or do you want us to kind of go talk about Roe v. Wade, since it is very prominent right now? Because there's a lot that we can discuss with that topic,
right,
based off of science, based off of recent, just a lot of things there. Because I've learned recently, which I want to say this, I've learned recently myself that women specifically are not written into our Constitution, which is why we have such a hard time with all of these things. And we can go into what that means, but we only have the right to vote. That's it. That's the only thing that's written for women in our Constitution, with the amendments and everything. And I think that's kind of a huge thing. And I never really realized that until recently in doing like my own research and learning and stuff like that. And I find it baffling that I never realized that, and that 35, almost 36, and just now realizing that I still have very little rights as a woman in this country. So yeah, there's a lot we could go into on that to teach you.
Of course, there's always the more quote regular areas of law. We could delve into divorces, why some states are community property and some aren't.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we don't always have to go political. We just tend to talk about those because those are the reason why I personally like to talk about the hot topics that are happening right now is because a lot of this stuff people don't understand. Like I just learned a lot when it comes to districting and understanding why and understanding because nothing is black and white. It's all very complicated. And in order to in order to make a good decision, you have to fully understand what you're looking at. And our country is in a political turmoil. Like even right now, we're still in so much political turmoil. So that's why I like to, because I'm learning along with you. And so we'll start adding in a little bit less, a little bit more non-political stuff so that you can learn other basic legal things. So if you have suggestions, let us know, tell us what your suggestions are, what you really, what you want to learn about. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, babe.
We could go into, I got pulled over by the police. What should I do? What's going to happen to me? We can go into things like that. I will say one other effect of gerrymandering districts is you get these long-term congressmen or senators that have been in there 20, 30, 40 years because their district is safe. People shouldn't be in Congress for 40 years.
Yeah.
There needs to be fresh blood every so often, or it just stagnates. And what we have right now is a stagnated Congress.
Yeah. And we have people, you have Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell in a pissing race, in a pissing contest for the last, 30, 40 years?
Since the 80s.
Yeah, since the 80s. Why? We don't need that. Both of them are bad for business. Both of them. As much as I dislike Mitch McConnell, I dislike Nancy Pelosi as well. I agree with some of the things she's done more than Mitch, but they, at this point in their career, all they care about is outdoing the other. They don't give a crap about us. Yeah, I said it. I'm not the biggest fan. I don't like Nancy Pelosi either. Now, I will say, as a woman, I appreciate when she will stand up for herself because she does stand up for herself. I appreciate that. And any woman who does that, I appreciate. I love that she will do that and she will tell those men to sit down. They don't have a right to say anything about her or about women's rights. Like that kind of stuff makes me happy, which is why I like her just a little bit more than Mitch McConnell. But other than that, no, she's on the same level as Mitch McConnell. They need to go.
Yeah, and I would throw our senior senator along with that, Dianne Feinstein. It's beyond time. She doesn't need to run again.
Yeah.
Please, let's get some new blood.
I definitely agree with that. It is time for us to rejuvenate our Congress. And we're probably going to say this every single time we talk about something like this. It's time for the old folks to go into the old folks home. It's time for y'all to retire. You don't need to be 75 years old and still in politics because you ain't relevant. You ain't relevant.
It's time to turn over the power from the baby boomers to Gen Y and the millennials.
Yeah.
I would say Gen X. I'm part of Gen X, but we're slackers.
Well, I
We
mean,
can't turn much over to us.
well, the thing is,
Let us pass along too.
Gen X got screwed, right? The baby boomers came in and literally took everything over and just was like, y'all don't, whatever. Y'all don't need to take, anyway, we won't get into the generation conversation. But yeah, it's time. And it's time to end our podcast. So
been an hour already? Okay.
Yeah, it's been an hour. So thank you so much for everyone for hanging out. Is there anything else that you would like to throw out there about districting, voting, anything other than go vote in your local elections and keep up with that?
Make sure that you are on the voter roll, that they haven't deleted you off it.
Can you repeat that, but in the microphone?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Make sure that you are actually registered to vote where you live in your county and that you haven't been purged off the roll for some reason.
Yes.
Because they don't tell you if you're purged off the roll. You just get purged and you go vote and you find out you're not registered anymore. Yeah. So there is a website you can go to. I can't recall it, but you can Google, "Am I registered to vote?" and it will send you to the link. And you can see if you're registered or not.
It is vote.org. Just, am I registered to vote? Vote.org.
Okay, there you go.
Are you registered to vote? This will take 30 seconds. I'll put that in. It's in the live chats. I will also link it on the YouTube, and I will link it on the show notes as well, so that you can easily get to that. Make sure you're registered to vote. Yeah. All right. And with that, thank you so much for listening to Learning the Law. If you like this podcast and want to hear more, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share in all your favorite places. You can find it hosted on Twitch at twitch.tv/PhoenixNymphy. Use the hashtag LearningTheLaw on all your favorite social media platforms to follow more there. You can find Ron on Twitter at NecroKijo. That is NECROKIJO, and Ashley on most social media platforms at PhoenixNymphy. If you have any questions, please tweet, comment, or email at twolazydogsmedia@gmail.com. This has been a Two Lazy Dogs Productions.
Yep. Bye, everyone.